band of brothers and native to the soil, fighting for our liberty with treasure, blood, and toil. And when our hats were threatened, the cry rose near and far, hurrah for the bonny blue flag that bears a single star. Hurrah, hurrah, for Southern rights, hurrah, hurrah for the bonny blue flag that bears a single star. As long as the Union was faithful to her trust, like friends and like brethren, kind we were and just. But now when Northern treachery attempts our rights to mar, we'll hoist on high the bonny blue flag that bears a single star. Hurrah, hurrah, for Southern rights, hurrah, hurrah for the bonny blue flag that bears a single star. First gallant South Carolina nobly made the stand. Then came Alabama and took her by the hand. Next quickly Mississippi, Georgia, Florida, all raised on high the bonny blue flag that bears a single star. Hurrah, hurrah, for Southern rights, hurrah, hurrah for the bonny blue flag that bears a single star. Men of valor gather around the banner of the right. Texas and for Louisiana joined us in the fight. Davis, our loved president, and Stephen, statesmen are now rallied behind the bonny blue flag that bears a single star. Hurrah, hurrah, for Southern rights, hurrah, hurrah for the bonny blue flag that bears a single star. Here's to brave Virginia, the old Dominion state, with the young Confederacy at length has linked her fate. Impelled by her example, now other states prepare to hoist on high the bonny blue flag that bears a single star. Hurrah, hurrah, for Southern rights, hurrah, hurrah for the bonny blue flag that bears a single star. Then cheer, boys, cheer, and raise a joyous shout, for Arkansas and North Carolina now have both gone out. And let another rousing cheer for Tennessee be given. The single star of the bonny blue flag has grown to be 11. Hurrah, hurrah, for Southern rights, hurrah, hurrah for the bonny blue flag that bears a single star. And here's to our Confederacy, strong we are and brave. Like patriots of old we'll fight our heritage to save. And rather than submit to shame, to die we would prefer. So cheer, cheer for that bonny blue flag, it bears a single star. Hurrah, hurrah, for Southern rights, hurrah, hurrah for the bonny blue flag that bears a single star. Hurrah, hurrah, for Southern rights, hurrah, hurrah for the bonny blue flag that bears a single star.
And we are live.
We are, gentlemen.
We're talking even.
It's another. It's. I mean, you guys are. This is JP coming at you live. I'm here with the esteemed fellow host with the most, Burger Meister.
Howdy.
And we have on the Dixie Polis fellas. Go ahead, fellas, and introduce yourselves.
Well, I'm Travis.
And I'm Lukas.
And we are Southern men dereconstructing the South.
That's right. And that's basically the intro for our podcast, which is the Dixie Polis Podcast.
So
Shameless
that's
plug.
pretty. No, not shameless. Nope. Good, very, very well. And I was listening to one of your podcasts before coming on here a little while ago, and it definitely opened up my eyes. And the topic for this is going to be, more so Southern heritage than anything, as the common denominator amongst three of you here. I am, from the north, still in the north, cold as hell. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. And yeah, I mean, I just find it, obviously the history is fascinating. Obviously, the history of the United States is fascinating. So I guess I'll kick it off with something I'm going to ask the negative question first. Something you don't like about the South and something you do like about the South.
Mosquitoes.
Hey,
The
man,
blasted human. Oh, sorry.
You talking about my state bird there, man?
Well,
Man,
you
might
can
as
keep
well
your
be
state bird in your state.
Might as
Not
well be
mine.
a blasted bird as big as they get sometimes.
Yeah, man. I don't think bigger is skeeter huts.
Yeah,
Well-
they're the unsung heroes, they got
Every time I see one, I give it a good old pet and just let it go. And thank you for
Mhm.
your service.
Yeah, I gotta say, for me, it's the humidity, man.
It's not so bad once you get used to it. I used to hate the humidity too, but then I started working in the AC.
Yeah, I never had that opportunity for as long as I was living in the South. For context, I'm from Texas, but I currently live in Colorado. So, just this is a temporary thing, but at the moment, I'm enjoying the lack of humidity.
Yeah, I actually like the humidity. Where I'm from, it's probably between 90 and 100% humidity all the time. I literally live in a swamp, which is fine. I actually enjoy the swamp. You can get out there and put on your spook suit and hide out in the swamp if anybody, from the feds decide to knock on your door. It's that kind of fun stuff. I would have to say that the thing I dislike about the South, if it's one thing, it would be there's too many Yankees here.
Unironically, but I mean,
I avoid the area with too many Yankees, so that's just kind of how that goes.
now JP, to preface this, we do make a distinction between Northerners and Yankees. So
Yes,
you're a
absolutely.
Northerner, so you're actually human. Yankees are we're still wondering about them.
You're a breed apart, fellers.
Well, I'm a little bit more. I mean, I'm a Wolverine, so that might help. Technically a Wolverine, but that was a division of the Union. And
Well,
the funny
even-
part is the U of M, University of Michigan, are the Union colors. So that's kind of weird.
Even Wolverines can be redeemed, brother. No problem.
I don't like University of Michigan, so screw them.
Well, Midwesterners, right? Like we always had kind of a ambivalent opinion on them down here because, like, on one hand, yeah, they were on the Union side, but on the other hand, they were kind of the part of the Union side that we really respected, right? Like all the really good, tough units, like the Iron Brigade and stuff, came from over there. So it's like, okay, well, they're the ones that got some gumption to them, and they're usually not, pushing all the crap on us. So y'all all right.
Well, but they've inherited some of the Southern spirit to begin with, so yeah, that factors into it as well. They don't like being told what to do either.
You reckon it's because they're a lot more spaced out than the Northeast is? Around like New England area, they're all crammed up on top of one another versus out in the Midwest. Apart from the cities themselves, they're still relatively spread out, similar to how the South is. Do you think that might have anything to do with that mindset?
Oh yeah. I mean, like we go up north here in Michigan, and I mean it's a common thing where we just go past a certain point in the state, and I mean it's farmland, it's rural, but it's not all farmland. There's natural beauty to the state, and it just puts you in a different mindset, and it just puts you away from everything. So I mean, obviously it's a very naturally beautiful state, and yeah, I think that does help with the Northeasterners. I would also say are a different breed too. I've known a couple of Northeasterners, and I would definitely say they're different than us, but on how, I don't know, I don't want to say like who's tougher, who's not, but man, they get pounded with snow. Like, I don't even know how you could live in a city like New York or Boston or maybe Philly, and just and be okay with just getting piled on. Like it's not like it's here, where we get like 4 inches, 5 or 6 inches sometimes. Oh, I'll just go out, clear my driveway, no big deal. There it's just like they are indoors for a long time, and I mean, I would think that would make people pretty upset. So I don't know, maybe it's a mentality thing.
Start getting cabin fever, and you wind up like that Johnny from, oh crap, I'm drawing a blank on that movie now.
I don't know that movie.
The one where he's like trying to kill his wife and kid because he's snowed in up on top of in Colorado. Crap. The Shining. There it is. Get cabin fever, and then you start going after your kids with an axe.
Technically, he was possessed as well, but
Well, yeah, but
Yeah,
cabin fever, possessed.
Possessed by the spirit of Lincoln. But anywho, up in the Northeast, it's like it's less of a lumber axe and more of a damn broken broken whiskey bottle in a lot of cases, especially if it's New England, Massachusetts.
Well, I know about the rural people, but do the urban and the suburbanites actually know how to use axes? I'm asking for a friend.
Well, in Colorado, sure, but that's a whole different story from the.
Well, no, I thought we were talking about the Northeast.
Well, yeah, he just said first he'd mentioned that, so.
Yeah,
I don't have a clue. But Paul Bunyan's pretty big here, so maybe.
I will make the classic distinction between, in the case of New York, between upstaters and real New York Yankees in the city. It's like the city ones are the ones that we avoid like the plague, and that seemingly all want to come down to the South. Now the upstaters, they're like Paul Bunyan if he's constantly walking around with bunions and he won't shut up about it. Like they're kind of not the nicest folks, but other than that they're all right.
My visit to upstate New York, if you can actually imagine, I left Alabama one time. Went all the way up to upstate New York. A funeral, but anyways, neither here nor there. I drove 26 hours straight to get up there, but anyways, beautiful place. If it wasn't for the Democrats' high taxes and unions, man, I'd love to live up there. It is absolutely gorgeous in July. It was like 65 degrees. One day I'm leaving, it's like 110 down here. And by the time I get up there, it's like got frost on my windshield going through Amish country. It was crazy.
I got a buddy of mine who lives in the rural areas of New York, and he's still possessed with some of the Yankee mentality, but I love him all the same. He's all right. He just he's liberty minded, we'll say that.
That's about all you can ask out of him these days,
Yeah, hey man, he's a good Christian man. It's all good. I just, I tell him to quit being a Yankee every once in a while.
Quit acting like a dad blame Puritan. Anyways,
is there a positive question?
I was saying what, but the other question was, what do you guys like about the South?
I mean, without being too generic.
Besides hating on Yankees.
No. I'll spearhead this one. So I enjoy the homeliness of the people from my state, from Mississippi. We just recorded a podcast, and one of the things we talked about is how Southerns, while we got a penchant for egos every once in a while, we don't like people who think higher of themselves than they ought. And usually this actually feeds into some of our dislike of quote unquote the educated. But usually when you got somebody who knows a few, they've read a few historical documents, their head starts growing in size exponentially. And that's just about the time when a good Southern boy is going to make them look bad, especially from where I'm from. But I enjoy the people. I really enjoy the nature that's around. I avoid the heavily populated areas, of course, but I just enjoy the culture, the homeliness, the desire for a real kind of community, and you don't get that from people who are mercenary about everything.
Yeah, there's still a sense of loyalty down here. I mean, if you insult someone's cousin, then their cousin's going to come after you, type thing. And that's both good and bad. I mean, on one hand, you don't want to walk around with a chip on your shoulder, but you're still loyal to something. You're not just selling yourself out to the highest bidder, though that's becoming more and more prevalent. We've discussed in some of our previous podcasts about people selling land to developers, and out of their community, they're making someone else rich and not their people rich type deal. But there's still a sense of a strong community and familial bond down here, which bleeds over into there's still a cultural Christianity that still lingers down here. So when I say a cultural Christianity, that's both good and bad, because on one hand, you have the people that says, oh yeah, I walk down the aisle, I'm a Christian, because I walked down when I'm 8 years old. But on the other hand, you still have people that's not going to put up with burning churches and that sort of stuff. Like there's still a reverence when we talk about things of God. While that is starting to wane, I don't think that's going to wane too much further back. I think that's going to be pushed forward, especially with what I'm seeing is like the new quote unquote conservative resurgence type deal that's going on in America right now. Regardless of what media actually tells you, I think conservatives are actually winning on a lot of issues, even if they're not winning politically. But that's also leads into another thing that I like is we are true conservatives. We're not just people that want to conserve 10 years ago. We actually want to conserve our identity, our way of life, our our culture and what made us actually great. We're actually trying to conserve a tradition while still building upon that tradition and going forward with that. I think a lot of times, especially in conservative and traditionalist movements, we tend to glorify the past more than what they actually were. I love the Old South. I love everything that she stood for, but there comes a time whenever you need to take the good and then build something better type thing. And I think that's what true conservatism is. And that's one thing. I mean, Southern conservatism is not like Northern conservatism. It's just not. Northern conservatism, with all due respect to Northern listeners, is basically just a old style of liberalism. It's just classical liberal. You're not really. You just want the you just want a form of liberty and a form of individualism without actually conserving true and lasting values. You basically just left yourself to become a libertarian at that point.
Yeah, and for my end, well, I was kind of chuckling because you mentioned the people, selling their land off and bringing all these, foreign developers in. We call them scalawags. But, yeah, like from my end, what I love about the South is, I don't have to explain basic concepts to people down here. There's a shared understanding of worldview to some degree down here. And it seems like people just aren't questioning basic reality every 2 seconds, Like there's just this sense of groundedness that I don't get from other parts of the West as a whole. And that's it's you don't appreciate it till you realize it, And a lot of Southerners, this is kind of the other side of that sword, is that a lot of us don't realize really what's going on out there in the world because of that. We just assume, well, things are going to be all right because that's just kind of how it always is. That's just how it always goes. But, there's some very nefarious people acting from outside to change that, and who have changed that in much of the rest of the world, unfortunately.
You don't have to explain basic concepts like boys are boys and girls are girls. We haven't really gotten swathed with the transgender craze, though that they're here. They're not accepted into mainstream reality like other places of America, and we don't have to explain these basic fundamental biological tenets to people because it's just kind of how it is.
Like in a lot of ways, rural Southerners, I feel like mentality wise, they're almost, and some people might, see this as something of an insult if they're not understanding what I'm quite saying by it, but they're almost mentally kind of the heirs to the European peasantry in a way. Like we have kind of that remnant of an almost medieval attitude towards a lot of things, in that we understand that there's a natural order of existence. There's kind of this harmony of nature, and and to a lot of to some degree a harmony with nature too, that I guess you could call a passive environmentalism of a sort, which you're always going to have your big greedy oil baron or whatever who is just out for himself and doesn't care about any of that. But still, you're going to have. It's just there's just more of a general sense of cohesion in the whole society, I think.
Well, I said last weekend that the South is probably the closest. We're more English than the English actually are. If we want to, if I'm just going to be blunt with that. And what I mean by that is we still have an understanding of whether or not we, as I said previously, whether or not we can articulate it or not. We understand that there are class distinctions. We have the rednecks, the blue collar guys, which those tend to kind of bleed into one another. And then you also have the new planter class, I would call them, which is the good old boys, right? They're the guys that wear AFCOs and whatever those shirts are with the vents in the back. You know what I'm talking about. They wear Costas, that type of stuff. You can spot them. You know who they are. They're friendly to one another. The hierarchies somehow mesh. We get along, but we don't really fraternize with each other too much. And that's okay because we understand our station. And I think we're the last vestiges in, dare I say, Western society that understands the role of stations. That a man is born in a particular field. Yes, he can move up into other classes of life, but for the most part, he is where he is. He is in this hierarchy, and we respect people that are in different levels of the hierarchy. So I think we're definitely more down to earth. We're more English than the English. And a great example of we're more down to earth is we know where our food comes from. A lot of people think chicken nuggets come from the store, but most kids in the South know that their chicken nuggets come from chickens. Like literal chickens, like living animals, or their hamburgers come from the moo cows that they see on the side of the road while they're, driving to church or driving to the grocery store type deal. I think it's just because we see it more often.
Yeah, and I mean, to be, and to Burger's point, like, I definitely found that in my grandparents. Like, they were both immigrants from, well, no, my grandmother was an immigrant. My grandfather was born here on my mom's side, and they lived through the Depression. So, they kind of did have, it's weird because they grew up in the suburbs of Detroit, in Detroit, but they still had that, like, that rural mentality to, like, be peasants and, to, like, conserve things. And, family meant a lot. And, and the old school, like, Northerners always had that mentality. They always had, it's weird though, because it's like, I mean, obviously a lot of both my grandparents on my mom's side were immigrants, so I can't really speak from a legacy perspective, but the part that, where I see that overlap of having that, it's obviously, a European mentality, and I don't think of it just strictly in Anglo sense, because I don't really come from anything that is Anglo, but it's strange because when you hear about the South and how Anglo it used to be and how heavily influenced that culture was through it. Oh yeah, I mean, it's all over the place in the North. It's just in different modes. Like I guess you could say, the Western penchant for, like, entrepreneurship and capitalism is huge up here. You guys have your symbols and your Southern symbols, obviously, like the rebel flag. But up here, I mean, I hate to say this, but it's hot dogs and, hamburgers and stuff like that. But, like, those are our symbols, and, and there's definitely naivety due to convenience factors here. But I mean, that could be across the board. I don't know. That's anecdotal at best. But there is definite like tie-ins to like cultural crossovers. And the weird part about it is like I see like your version of conservatism, the Southern version of conservatism, and it does, and it could mesh really well with the Northern version of it. It's just weird on how, like, there's a community-based approach, and then there's like KB said, or Travis said, there's the like oil baron, approach to it. And there's like the balancing act that's there, because there's those archetypes in our mind that obviously, can, if you've grown up and you've seen these things kind of play out and are interested in this kind of stuff, like it obviously kind of plays around in your mind, and it kicks around, and it just there's overlap there, and I'm trying to get it out, but I'm having a hard time kind of like pulling it all together to put a nice bow on top of it. But one of you guys go ahead.
Well, to shoot in real quick, talk about hot dogs and hamburgers. That's the other thing I really like about the South is the food. Ever since I moved up to Colorado, I have been missing a good chicken fried steak, because you cannot get good food hardly anywhere up here. I'm sorry. And that's one thing y'all have a little bit better up in the Midwestern cities, is y'all have a lot more authentic immigrant food, Like out here, it's, you can get some pale imitation of it maybe, but yeah, it's a dearth.
Yeah, I think the biggest the biggest not polarization, but dichotomy, I guess you could say, basically, if you're looking at it on two ends of the scales, is how do we define barbecue? And obvious, Burger, you're gonna disagree with me on this, but because you're from Texas.
This is a serious subject matter. Hold up. Okay, I keep going now.
Me and Burger are going to disagree on what barbecue is, but we're close. It's still slow smoked meat. And so you would probably say that brisket's barbecue, and I would say that I'm a pulled pork purist. That's a mouthful. And a lot of times when people say from up north that they're having a barbecue, what they mean is they're having a cookout.
Oh yeah, okay.
They're throwing hamburgers and hot dogs on a grill. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not barbecue. You know what I'm saying? Barbecue takes several hours. You're sitting there throwing pecan wood, and you're just slowly cooking that meat until it just falls off the bone. Man, need a barbecue.
It's a specific flavor you're working with too, Yeah. Like there's an exact flavor profile you're going for. And I feel like that's why we in Texas categorize brisket as barbecues, because it fits that same flavor profile.
Okay.
I feel like that's the difference in semantics going on there. But yeah, grilling and barbecuing ain't the same thing.
And all right. I mean,
we'll talk about chili next.
Oh,
you're gonna start a war with that one, boy.
Oh yeah, because we got it up here, and I don't know about you guys, but chili is slap that on a hot dog and call it a coney dog. Oh, it's over. But
are you one of those Red Star chili fans or Skyline chili fans?
I have no idea what either. Well, I've had Skyline. It's okay. I don't know what I've never had Red Star.
I think it's Red Star. Both of them come out of Ohio, and a friend of mine's from up in Ohio, and he tried to pass that off as chili. It's good hot dog chili, but that ain't chili.
But that's basically what it's for, though. You slap that on a hot dog, and bam, that's what it's for. A barbecued hot dog. Oh yeah, we do that too. It's cold. It's cold up here.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, chili is supposed to be a full meal in a bowl, basically. Like you throw some cornbread up in there, throw some cheese on top. I'm not gonna say what all we put in the chili because that'll start the war. But I'm talking it's like a thick and hearty. It's not just some tomato sauce and it's a little bit of ground beef in there.
We do that too. We can do that too. It depends on the meat actually. Like I find I've done turkey chili, I've done chicken chili, I've done beef chili. It all comes out kind of differently. But my favorite is obviously the one you slap on top of a coney dog. I'll take that over everything. So
all we're saying is get you a can of Wolf or something. Just make sure what you're using is quality.
I've actually never seen a can of Wolf.
Oh, you never had Wolf brand chili?
No, I mean we typically just make it from scratch. But
I mean, yeah, but I'm just saying, if you gotta get a can, just comparing brands here. Obviously, homemade's gonna be better, but you can't expect that from everybody, Yeah,
I understand. But anyways, we've talked enough. Lucas, what do you think about food?
He's having a hard time with his audio. He's gonna have to restart, I think.
Okay.
Got like technical difficulties with your on-air sign at the moment, and you just play like a little intermission music, like little 8-bit stupid. Anyway, all right. So here's the thing: I got a smoker, and I don't call that barbecuing, but at the same time, I see what you guys are saying. That's kind of crazy because we distinguish between barbecue and smoking meat. But the thing is that really, if you think about it, barbecue is just, schematically or logistically, whatever, is that it's grilled meat. And you get those grill marks, and that's what barbecue is to us in the north. I mean, I guess that's what it is.
We just call that grilling.
Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, that's the other way to say it. But cookout. Yeah, I mean, cookout. It's funny because that's what the Detroiters say. They say cookout. They don't really say barbecue.
Yeah, that's what I say whenever I'm not barbecuing. When I'm like grilling out or something, I just say that I'm cooking out or something. But yeah. Anyways, it is kind of weird though, because I want to go back to that classical liberalism point and how you talked about the South being Christian. Like there is a definite identity to the South. And I don't want to play identity politics with you guys because that's stupid. But obviously there's archetypical, Americanisms, if you will. And I mean, there's definite parts of the country where you have like, the breadbasket, the Bible Belt, the great, the Midwest, the Great Lakes, the Northeast, the Southwest, Southeast. You got all those different, and even in Texas, like they got their own thing because they're freaking Texas, right? Plug for Burger. And it's like so you got these different identities going on. And obviously, when it comes to the South, I do think of like a Bible thumping Baptist preacher. It's like one of the first things that pops into my mind, where people work their butts off Monday through Friday. Saturday, they do their thing. They gotta, live their life, get to chill out a little bit, and on Sunday we're getting up and we're going to church. That's just that. It's just that kind of mentality that that is just stuck in my mind, probably because of a little bit of Forrest Gump, probably because of a little bit of you had all kinds of Southern movies. I mean, what's that other one? Inherit the Wind. Great movie. Love that movie.
Gone with the Wind, or is it something else?
I know. No. Inherit the Wind. You guys never seen that movie?
I have not.
Oh, it's a good one.
I'm gonna Google it.
Yeah, it's a movie about the South. Obviously, Huckleberry Finn. Obviously, Tom Sawyer. Obviously, Mark Twain. I mean, you just have all those those literary characters, that come to life. In a movie, obviously Gone with the Wind is iconic. I mean, that's Americana. I mean, that's like across the board American culture. So, I mean, I put like, Elvis, for God's sakes, you can't represent without, bringing the king up.
Good old state of Mississippi.
Well, speaking of the king, I mean, let's just talk about the how foundational the Southern music was to nearly all other music that that ever came about. I mean, we're the heart of country music, we're the heart of rock and roll, we're the heart of blues, jazz. I don't think so much. We could be, but I'm not really sure of jazz. Let's see. But yeah, I mean, basically everything.
Don't mess with my music.
Well, we're not talking about emo, so you're good.
Nah, jazz and blues are good music, man.
No, I'm not like putting them down. I like blues. I like country. I mean, country influenced rock and roll. Rock and roll influenced basically every other form of rock there is. I mean, if it wasn't for Elvis, then would we even have some of the great rock stars that we have today? Would Detroit's very own homeboy Kid Rock have made it to the scenes? If it wasn't for Elvis, if it wasn't for Hank Williams Jr., would men like Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings have made it out on the scene? So I don't think we should dismiss. Not dismiss, but I don't think we should overlook the influence that the South had on music as a whole.
Well, I mean, it's a different flavor. Like, there's a different flavor with it. Berg, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna addendum to that, because through rock you've got virtually all manner of music. Well, frankly, both good and bad that have come about. Because on one hand you got metal, but on the other hand you got pop too. So that develops both ways depending on who exactly takes it and interprets it. And we've got a problem in Nashville nowadays where you've got this very heavily corporate controlled music industry that has become a problem in and of itself. But yeah, go ahead, JP.
All right, so I really like the blues. I really like the old school blues, the new school blues. One of my favorites, his name is, I discovered him, gosh, I'm getting old. Dang, has to be about 15 years ago now. I'm going to plug for him. I might as well. Joe Bonamassa. He opened for a guy named Kenny Wayne Shepherd. Kenny Wayne Shepherd plays in the vein of like a Stevie Ray Vaughan. Plays that Strat, and it's that stringy sounding, Stratocaster that's just obviously iconic to Stevie Ray's sound. Joe came out and it just was just like, I was like, who is this guy? Because compared to Kenny Wayne Shepherd, I could listen to this guy for the next 3 hours and probably never be bored. I mean, he's obviously they call him a blues rock titan for a reason. Unknown though, very, very widely unknown. And he's taken some old blues songs, and done them his way. Because that's kind of a blues thing too, where they take covers and they reintroduce them, or they put their spin on it, kind of like Motown in a lot of ways. Motown is very heavily rhythm and blues, rock and roll, rockabilly. It's got. I mean, across the board, Motown is heavily influenced by, Southern music. It's definitely there. But I mean, this guy just came out and she's just, just a maniac. Like, he is just, I'm talking like, I'm not talking about like Kid Rock kind of maniac. I'm talking about this guy comes in with a mission every show, and he's just there just to play. He's just there to do his thing, play, and be awesome. So with this is like, he is so good that he doesn't have to be tainted by the music industry, and he lives in Nashville. He's not from the South; he's from upstate New York. Yeah, see, there we go. We got a tie-in, and he's just a great, just all around. He can play country, he can play blues, he can play rock, he can obviously, play all these different styles of music. But you see that the main vein is a Southern style of music, and that to me is just like, it's kind of mind blowing to where it comes from. But obviously, I'm not going to bring up to where the blues all the way originally comes from, but it's evolved into something more, because obviously the Southern culture in and of itself across the board is, it is American culture. It is uniquely its own American culture, and that to me, it's like it shows on how, well, I don't want to say, would diluted be a bad word to say, or would that be an unfair suggestion?
Well, let me tie in here. I wanted to bring this up a little earlier, but I had the technical difficulties. There was a slew of articles a couple of years back. The Atlantic ran them. Obviously the Atlantic did. CNN, ABC, it made the rounds. It was called the Southernification of Rural America, and they're basically catching on to this theme of the Southern ideal, the Southern ideas, and how they've spread throughout rural America. Now, they all lament this as an evil thing. I see it as an inevitability, because the South intentionally kept its rural roots for a reason. There's a book by Dave Grossman. He's a lieutenant colonel in the military, and it's called On Killing. And he ties the closeness to death. So we were talking about earlier, where people know their chicken nuggets came from chickens. They didn't come from the grocery store. They know their steak came from a moo cow, right? They realized the prevalence of death. This was and it still is in rural areas. It's a present state of being. You see it as a part of life. And Grossman's point, and I think it's a very good point, is having this closeness to death, having this understanding that we only survive because we kill other things to live, allows us to better appreciate life and the realities of life, and not just, we're alive, but to realize that there is hierarchy, to realize that people and animals and things, they all have their place, they all have their time. So, he equates people who have never killed and who talk about war or killing or something like that, as if they're virgins talking about sex, and that's a very real thing. The point of his book was that feeds into this fetishizing of killing that you see in the West now, where people are so separated from their food that they don't realize that things have to die. And so the two reactions to that realization, that culture shock that people have who've never been around death, and suddenly they realize that their chicken nuggets comes from an animal that was once alive. They either go full vegan, which, Lord bless their little heads, or they come to realize that, life isn't so simple that you can just slap categories on everything and walk away. And so the South really had this closeness with the land. They had a closeness with their livestock. They had a closeness with the way that nature operates. And so they understood hierarchies properly. And so they could talk about people being within their station, such as Travis did earlier, while still understanding their worth as a human being. It wasn't a degrading thing to say that you're reaching beyond your station. It's just a point of fact that has to be recognized. And so when we talk about the southernification of these areas, which kind of gets into what JP's talking about, where there are some tie-ins with the culture in the rural North and the South. And what I've seen photos from across the United States of people flying the cross of St. Andrews. People in New York flying across the St. Andrews, people in the Dakotas, people in, Northern California. And it's this affinity towards the position that the South has always taken, that we have to deal with reality as it comes. This is real conservatism, that we understand what reality is and we learn how to navigate it properly. Real wisdom, as the Psalms or Proverbs or Ecclesiastes would try to give to us. Learning how to really navigate our situation and try to come to the most just conclusions within that framework. That's something that the people who are on the ground, the truckers who are up in Ottawa right now, they understand this, and they understand it without being able to articulate it because they live it. They're actually on the ground. They know how things work. They see things as they work. The common working man understands this. And so this affinity for the South will naturally come to those who are living, in what would normally be understood as the lower echelons of society. You would automatically have an affinity for the South because of that. We don't, this is the hatred of pretense that we have. You're not better than what you think you are. You're just a human being, and you need to understand that you're just a human being. You have limits too. Operate within them, and it's good. Sorry,
Yeah.
that was a rant. I just was trying to catch up with.
No, that was a solid set of points, man. And talking about the whole concept of station, I feel like the Northern phenomenon of social striving, right? Of the constant need for, if somebody is in the lower class, that is a insult or that is a disgrace to them. They feel the constant need to strive upwards into the middle class, and this results in an active disdain for working class people. It results in this constant need to distance oneself from the basic realities on the ground in order to accrue social standing. And a lot of that's because there was no true upper class in the North. There was no sense of a natural aristocracy or any kind of group that held the reins in sort of a system of natural order. There was only that fluid, mobile, constantly shifting middle class, and that decided everything, right? And so they were just rich enough to separate themselves from reality, but not rich enough yet to sort of be established, and to have that sort of social responsibility going on. And so, yeah, you kind of just got the worst of both worlds in that regard. And I feel like that's a lot of what happened up there, especially in these coastal, port cities of New England that largely began this trend and ported over to some degree from the large cities in Europe.
This is kind of where my Calvinism starts to take over, and that God has decreed our station where we're going to be at when we're born. So we did a series on Dabney when we first started our podcast, And he didn't essentially allude to it. He outright said it. I can't remember the exact quote, but you are born to you are predestined to be born to your parents, right? So God has divinely decreed that this is where he's placing you. So therefore be faithful. We like, yes, I don't, I might have grown up poor, I didn't. I was, lower middle class, but if I'd have grown up poor, then I would have been faithful being poor and trying to work my way out of it, but being content with where God has placed me. And I think, being content is a huge Southern mindset, like, for instance, my dad was, he was quite a bit older than, normal dads for people my age. But, he grew up shoeless. His dad was basically a sharecropper, and he lived that kind of poor life, but he eventually made it to middle class. And learning some of the stories that, he was telling me is his family of 9 children was extremely content in the way that they lived. They, they might not have had shoes on their feet year round, but they had shoes in the winter, and they were glad for that. They might not have had indoor running water when he was growing up, but he was glad that they at least had water on the property type deal. And it's just a more down to earth way to look at things, And then obviously with, my dad wasn't raised Calvinist, so he didn't have this type of outlook. But with me, I can look back and say these things were put in my life as to form to better me as a person and to form me into the image of Christ, more so than, if he had placed me in another station, then I would not be experiencing these lessons, if you want to call them that. I wouldn't be experiencing the common grace of these things that he has put in my life, and I'm just content because he knows better than me, right? So, but anyways, I digress. It's kind of a rabbit trail.
That kind of feeds into the whole point, though, right? Is you understand a cross section of hierarchies that exist. For instance, you have the elderly. I had the privilege of sitting down with an elderly friend of mine before I left North Carolina, and he's not an educated man by any stretch of the imagination. He's not well read in any way, shape, or form. He's just a simple man who lived his entire life trying to honor God. And when you sit down, I've probably read more books that he's probably ever seen, honestly. And regardless of how much I've read, regardless of how much I can weave around with words or talk, or dissect ideas, when you're in the presence of a man of that age, you shut up and you listen. The man's got wisdom. He's got a life that he's lived, that God's led him through, and he's accumulated things over the years that people with all the fine words and silver tongues that exist can't really articulate properly because they don't understand. And so it's that kind of comes with the South has always honored the elderly historically. And that's why, because you understand that these people have wisdom, real wisdom. They've walked the walk. And so, it doesn't matter what your station is in terms of, well, I'm a businessman and this is a commoner. When you have an elderly man there, you give him the way, you give him the walk, you step aside, open the door for that man, listen to him, understand that he's got wisdom that you don't. Doesn't matter what you know. And it's those intersect, they overlap. It's not a black and white. The way that I'm gonna pull a dab to here and just call them Jacobins. The way that the Jacobins like to think about hierarchies is that there's just one hierarchy in the middle of the road, and everybody's got their place in there. And usually they want to they want to talk about economic hierarchies. But that's not how it works at all. There's overlapping
What
hierarchies.
is just for the listeners, what's a Jacobin?
So the Jacobins came out of they were kind of the intellectual voice behind the French Revolution.
Okay.
They believed in what we would call today the average man would call the commies. That's basically what they were before the commies were around. They believed in this blanket equality of mankind, that there's no distinction between men. That's how it started in the French Revolution. As it came over here, it kind of mixed with some of the Puritanism up in the Northeast. You had the Unitarians. You had, I believe it was the early Jehovah's Witnesses. Seventh-day Adventists. Yeah.
And the abolitionists. Let's not forget them heretics.
Right. Well, and they were all kind of this group who believed that there's no difference between human beings without distinction between male or female. And your modern your modern intersectional theories, the current intersectional nonsense that's coming out of the colleges today, that's all a direct logical conclusion from the Jacobins and the social direction that they wanted to take.
Yeah. Did I cut you off, man? I didn't mean to.
Okay. All right. He's not. All right.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. So it's the social direction that they wanted to take. Basically, each and every human being, according to a Jacobin, is interchangeable. There's no actual distinction, and this is where you get men can be women, women can be men. Gender is a spectrum. Each individual is just a person with sliders that you can manipulate if you have enough technology. And this leads directly into transhumanism.
Yeah, the weird part is that that's, and you see, like, the weird part is that there's a hierarchy to that revolutionary spirit, but the thing of it is that it's like the North has always seen that revolutionary spirit from the South as like a rebelling thing against, centralized society. You know what I mean? It's kind of like that give and take relationship that's there. And it's strange because it's like, when you see an elder, obviously that's going to show character to a person that's like, oh, I have to respect my elders. Otherwise, I'm going to go down a foolish path if I don't listen to this person who's already walked that path of wisdom. So therefore, why would I not want to honor this in a way, even though I might be intellectually more adept or physically stronger? But there it is, like that station in life. Boom, it's just like
right.
It's just like I've been in situations where there is an elder, there is a literal elder sitting in the room, and people are just drawn to that elder because of what they have to say and what they have to reciprocate to people, and actually be there in the presence of that wisdom, and that it's there. It's just like the Eucharist, obviously, in the church. It's that wisdom that's there, and it's given out. Like it's this is more valuable than all the gold in Washington, D.C. National Treasure plug. I'm kidding. But I mean, it's like one of those things where you're drawn to it because it's obviously something so distinctly human, but it's obviously something so distinctly something else. And you don't, but anyway, to that rebellious spirit is more of where I'm going with it. And obviously, the South, South will rise again. We're going to rebel. And then the North's like, no, you won't. I mean, it's like that. It's obviously a back and forth kind of thing. And to have a Northern attitude about anything nowadays, it's just. I mean, I'll be straight up honest with you. Sometimes it's just it's miserable because of how lost the identity has been on the North for so long. So it's just not there. It's not cognizant or coherent.
Well, the North has spent the last 150 years deconstructing everything it means to be human. What else would you expect?
Yeah, and as kind of an addendum to your whole point about the Jacobins and what they fundamentally were, what that is in origin, you can say, well, it's the Enlightenment. It goes further back than that. Really, this entire idea of the tabula rasa, the blank slate, it comes from humanism. And what humanism ultimately is, when taken to its logical conclusion, is this idea of the brotherhood of man, of equality. And really, it's a religion. It is literally, as was talked about biblically, about the worship of man over the worship of God, is what that fundamentally is at its core. Like, that's really what you have to go all the way down to in order to find the root cause of this issue, is the replacement of God with man as being what society worships. And from there, ironically, it becomes the most anti-human thing of all, because it seeks to destroy God's natural order for man. But to JP's point about like rebelliousness, right? I think that the South is not actually naturally rebellious, though. I feel that we're only rebellious because we are rebelling against rebellion, in a sense. Like, we are seeing the natural order being perverted or abused in some way. And so we are acting in rebellion against that out of loyalty to at least our vestiges, or what we can see that's left of kind of a natural ordered society.
Well, we would call it nature and nature's God.
Well, even a little bit more simpler than that. Why did the South succeed, and why did it raise arms against the Union? I saw a quote today, and I can't remember who it was by, but it essentially said that the South only raised its saber towards the Union in defense of the Union's Constitution. So when the South succeeded, they saw that the North was reneging on the Constitution, the pact between the states. Therefore, they left, and then they set the government up of the South nearly identical to the North. There was a few things that was switched around about it, but we can debate those issues later. But the Constitution was almost identical to the Northern Constitution, and it's because they thought that it was still a good idea. But the South, this goes back to the whole idea of conservatism versus classical liberalism, right? The North was classically liberal. The South was more conservative, and it does stem into all these other areas. But yeah, I mean, the South is actually very complacent until we're not, and then we're pretty flipping rowdy, I had something else I was going to go, but I just could not remember where I was supposed to go with that.
Well, that's kind of a character statement. Sorry, just let me get this out real quick. I'll let you talk. But it's kind of a character statement about people. They always say the biggest bombs have the longest fuse. And I feel like that is a broad character statement for the South as a whole. And for just about any calm, patient, centered man. And yeah, it's just like, we're not the type to cause trouble. but we very clearly recognize when trouble is being caused. And when it gets to just an unacceptable point, then, we might go off in a way that shocks other people. But, I mean, really, when you look at objectively, how can there be any other response to that when all other options have been exhausted,
Well, kind of feeding into that, the conversation about rebellion, the rebellion was against the rebellion, as JP said, against the created order. We talk about nature and nature's God. This goes back to what are we as human beings and how do we move forward? The spirit of the modern West and of the Yankee has been the spirit of Gnosticism, which, in 2 John, I think it was, John called it the spirit of the Antichrist. It causes people to become less human, and it causes them to become less human because they begin to deconstruct what they are as a human. And the ultimate conclusion that they come to is that the body is evil and spirit is good. Therefore, to destroy the body is good, and to encourage the spirit is good. Now, what you're going to come out of, where you're going to get coming out of the modern left movement is going to be like Meta, for instance. The company. They want to take you out of the human body and they want to put you in a machine and completely separate you from the natural realm. That's their goal. And they've been talking about it since the 70s. As far as I'm aware, they've been talking about this since the 70s. This was something that C.S. Lewis, in his novel, That Hideous Strength, actually anticipated coming from their side. And it started with a critique of what he called the Green Book, which was about the control of language, which you'll see ties to Orwell in that as well, because Orwell talked about using newspeak, or language that can be used in multiple contexts to mean separate things. And the whole point was infinite malleability of the human mind and perception. I know this kind of gets, it seems like it's getting into esoteric lore here, but the reality is this is what we're dealing with. The left can go out and they can say, well, gay means homosexual, so gay means you're happy, gay means you're okay. Every decade they're going to change whether you call people black people, whether you call them persons of color, whether you call them colored people. They're going to keep swapping these names up, and the wider society, unfortunately, seems to be going along with this because they haven't caught on to the game yet. The right in the United States specifically has spent the last 4 decades adopting the language of the left, adopting the definitions of the left. And this is why modern conservatism is not actually conservative. It doesn't conserve anything. It follows the changing landscape of the language as dictated by a bunch of Jacobins. This all started back in the Civil War. We're the modern difficulties that we're having, if all the pieces haven't been brought together for the listeners today. The modern conflict today between the coastal elites and the rural people, between the mass, the vaxxers, the anti-vaxxers, so-called, all of these battle lines that are being drawn. It's all going back to the very thing that the Civil War was fought over. The North wanted to change what it meant to be equal. Dabney talked about this in his essays. Equality to the Jacobin was this mechanical equality, that there's no difference between you and someone else. Equality in the Old English sense, and that the South adopted from the English, was you are made in the image of God, and you have rights and responsibilities according to your station, and you have freedom of thought. that was where that came from. And incumbent in the freedom of thought was freedom of speech, because they understood the power of language, and they understood that when people speak, it's a way of formulating their own thoughts. They externalize their thoughts and they make them real. But if you can control someone's vocabulary, you can control what they think and how they think. Lewis caught onto this. Orwell caught onto this. This was the conflict of the Civil War, the war between the states, was a conflict over what it means to be equal. Now, we're looking at this from two different sides. Militarily, the North won that conflict, but culturally, they lost it in a sense, because all of the rural areas are starting to understand why the North was wrong during the Civil War. And more I hear people from the North, they've read Lincoln's discourse with Marx. They were butt buddies. You see Davis's defense of slavery and of the South. You see Dabney, which the whole reason why we even wanted to start with Dabney is a criminally underrated figure of the South during that time, and a criminally underrated theologian for that matter. And both of us are Baptists. We love our Presbyterian brothers, and he was an absolute powerhouse when it came to philosophy, theology, civics. I mean, he knew his stuff across the board. And he brought up, one of the things that really impressed me about Dabney specifically is he wrote out a systematics, and the first thing he addressed in systematics was naturalistic materialism. Dealing with that, dealing with the left, dealing with this manipulation of language, these are very important things that we have to actually become aware of and address before we're going to get any kind of ground. I know that's kind of a long-winded thing.
But I think you set me up for something I was mentioning the other day. Now this right here, I haven't refined this theory, so don't take me to the gallows just yet. But again, this plays back into my God decreed. The ends, the means, and the beginnings, right? And I think the South lost for a reason. I mean, you kind of have to whenever you say that God decrees everything, right? You kind of have to say that He had purpose for the South losing. And what if the South lost to do two things? To bring judgment upon the North, in the version of we sent a literal swath of welfare freeloaders up north. And I'm not being racist with that, but let's just take it for what it is. There's all the freed slaves that did not stay down here, but rather migrated up north, either went north and died because the North was inhospitable to them, both the climate and the people. All them abolitionists did not want to take care of all the freed blacks, right? They did not want them in their area. They wanted them to stay put, just freed down south. But also, they died of the climate and the people. Okay, and now look at the cities today. Look at Detroit. All right, it is literally a welfare magnet for the for their entire population. But anyways, getting back off of that, I think that the South lost to bring down the Union, and then thus the South is also going to be raised up again. I literally believe it when I say the South will rise again. I suck at pronouncing Latin. Is it Deo Vindice?
Deo Vindice, yeah.
Deo Vindice. God is our vindicator. Okay, God will vindicate the South if we are right. And I believe that we will be vindicated in the end. Whether it be now or 100 years from now. Okay, because every prediction that Jefferson Davis, R.L. Dabney, P.H. Mell, James Montgomery Boyce, etc. I can just sit there and name them all off. Their predictions have come true. And I think that the South is going to save the Union. Why do I say that? Well, just, listening to what Luke said earlier about the southernization of rural areas. Not only that, but where are these people from these big cities moving to? They're moving to the South. They're moving to Texas. They're moving to Louisiana. They're moving to Mississippi. They're moving to Tennessee. They're moving to Alabama. They're moving to Georgia. They're moving to Florida. We can view that as a curse, or we can view that as the future converts are coming to us, and all we have to do is sit on our front porch and evangelize to them. We don't have to go to foreign countries to evangelize the pagans. The pagans are literally coming to us because we have actually preserved a society. Now, again, as I preface that with, I'm not sure that it's a completely airtight argument yet. I've still got to work that out, but I think that's a possible theory, and we'll see in the future.
We'll kind of look at
see. Oh, sorry.
You go ahead, JP.
I see the esotericism. It's there. It's definitely prevalent. So, I don't want to harp on the theology aspect of this because you can't give away the next episode. Come on, guys. That's what a good podcast is for. But anyway,
it's just a taste. Just
like the barbecue. It's grilling.
That's right.
No, it's barbecue. I don't know what chili is anymore. I'm so confused. Anyway, guys. All right. What I'm saying is you there's a pathology to it, right? And that pathology is prevalent there because when you guys say union too, I don't just think of it as the Confederacy versus the Union. Obviously, the Civil War happened. Obviously, there were not only historical implications, there were prophetic implications, there were social implications, there were religious implications, across the board. It's just society, right? And Detroit, in a sense, is kind of a microcosm of that. And I know you didn't even mean to touch on the race thing there, Travis. But I can even think about that in a sense because of how distinct Detroit culture was across the board, through the Depression, through the automotive industry, the industrialization. Obviously, you had Henry Ford, who was a titan among capitalists, a titan among robber barons, a titan among he's an American icon. You could put him right up there. You're gonna put the Ford brand right up there with Budweiser, right? So what I'm saying is that it's there's just that aspect to American culture that is a cornerstone, and there is that work ethic and that pathology that's across the board, and it doesn't necessitate itself towards a racial aspect. But see, the problem is that these highly educated, and they're stupid people, because the problem is when I talk to somebody like Travis, Luke, Burger, you guys across the board, I'd ask you guys about stuff on how to do stuff. I'm in a suburban area, so I can't go out and till the land. But there's just simple stuff that people don't teach you anymore, how to be self-sufficient, and that to me has to be some of the stupidest stuff across the board. And that pathology has come down from that quote unquote, well, we need this revolutionary spirit to be better people. No, you don't. No, you don't. You need to. There's a hierarchy, like Luke said. There's a hierarchy across the board with stuff, and in a sense, do I think it's immobile? Yes, because of obviously, I'm speaking more from an Orthodox Christian perspective. But do I also think that there also is a providence with things, with you said, Travis, the South will rise again, but there's also a reason why you lost. There's also a reason why you guys look at it from a different perspective, because of that perspective being Well, I mean, if we're going to talk about anything that Southern is, all get out, and I meant that with every implication across the board. It's revivalism. I mean, revivalism is a huge, huge thing, and I know it's got its wacky tacky, stuff going on there. And you guys touched on a guy I'm familiar with, Dabney, kind of. But I mean, I understand like that revivalism spirit never loses itself. Now, revivalism is obviously different than a revolutionary spirit. And you guys never lose sight of that grip, or that doesn't make any sense. You guys never lost sight of that goal or having that, that spirit with it, right? And there's it's definitely there.
If I could just, I want to shift the language just a little bit, because I want to maintain this understanding of the South being conservative and what that means. So when we talk about being rebels, right, it comes from, rebellion against illegitimate authority, rebellion against tyrants is obedience to God. Now, Dabney in his civic ethics, he talked about the shape that rebellion takes. The South is not revolutionary in the sense of I'm going to step back a bit, because in the quote unquote Revolutionary War, the War for Independence, the founding fathers were not revolutionaries. They fought against a king who didn't have any contact with his subjects, who was making decisions that would ruin the people without having any share in that downfall. And that's an illegitimate authority who won't share in the downfall of his subjects. They fought for the right of Englishmen. They understood English rights. They understood the rights of Western men during that time. And they wanted to preserve that dynamic. They wanted to preserve that paradigm. They weren't trying to upend the system and change the system. They wanted men who were accountable, that had true authority and true legitimacy. That's what they were aiming for. Now, the revolutionary aspect, well, they didn't want a king. We can go back and forth on that a little bit, but I don't think people realize how close we had to having a king, because there were a lot of people in the United States, the colonies at the time, who wanted to keep a king, and they were okay with a monarchy. They just didn't want a monarchy that was disconnected from its people. That was the real fight. That was the real conflict. So I don't want to get nitpicky with the language, JP. I just want to contextualize it properly, because it's rebellion for sure, but it's rebellion against an authority that would usurp God's authority, that would take away from what God has given to man. I like to think of this as dominion ethics, right?
Yeah.
We have a creative mandate to take dominion and to establish small kingdoms as men. Mm-hmm. And those kingdoms actually externalize through the form of judges and kings and administrators, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. That's an extension of you being a father and a husband, is you going out and being a judge or a congressman or a king or something of that sort. Yeah. That was the understanding of the English system, and that's what the South wanted to preserve, and that cultural difference was why they were pushing it back against the North, by and large.
Well, and I see that like as obviously Orthodoxy, or the Orthodox Church stands against the papacy, and why they call us schismatics and we call them heretics. I know we got a great working relationship, let me tell you. but but I mean, there's that, when we use the word Catholic, it's different than how they use the word Catholic. When they say the word Orthodox, it's different how we say the word Orthodox. So, I mean, there's different, obviously, contextualizations there, but I see what you mean because, well, the old adage, no taxation without representation. And obviously, people want to know where their hard-earned money is going, right? And you guys touched on this with the episode with what's I forgot. Is it Masonius Rufus or is it just Rufus or?
Yeah, that's him.
Masonius Rufus.
You brought up a good point, Luke, Lucas, where it was downstream, and even he brought it up as well, but you guys played off of that, where it was the downstream ethics of like, well, why would you want to give your money to people who are spiritually corrupt? And I mean, we obviously see that with the papacy and the decentralization of the faith, but that I mean, this has nothing to do with church governance. So I'm going to shift this more to American governance. Why would you want to give your money to a president who is not going to represent your interests? So that's a little bit more in the contextualization of, where you were going with it.
Well, it's even more than that. It's why would you support and why would you, throw your weight behind, or why would you back a government that hates you? Like, fundamentally hates you. They hate your way of life. They hate who you are. They hate what you are. And they've created an entire corpus of law and philosophy to dismantle and destroy what you are. And I'm not speaking, like, even right now, I'm not speaking specifically to the South. I'm speaking to anybody who fears God and would honor God and try to live within his world. Like,
because you went down that esoteric rabbit hole, I saw where your pathology was going. It's that archaic humanistic narrative to where it ultimately we become our own worst enemy when we replace our own wills with the will of God. Obviously, it's different. It's a transcendent. It's got very good benefits to it, but the flip side is the upside. It's the upside down rebelliousness, revolutionary spirit where it's misplaced. It becomes
right. Yeah.
Somebody like what am I trying to say? Like you're eating yourself alive, kind of thing.
Yeah, and they're I think C.S. Lewis, I'm kind of paraphrasing here. He said, in their desire to control nature, they became slaves to nature. Instead of having your role, this is why I talked about the creation mandate or dominion ethics, right? We've been given the authority over the earth, and so we have to exercise that. Not only do we have to own that, we have to be the rightful rulers of the land, but we also have to understand that we act as representatives of one who is higher and greater than we. We act as God's hand on earth to act and to do. That doesn't mean he can't act outside of our hand, but that means that when we act, we're acting in his name. That's why he takes it so seriously when you sin. To the atheist out there, that's why he cares who you sleep with, because you're acting with his authority. And when you act in such a way to abuse that authority, let's just say he's the big bad, right? That's why it's worthy of eternal damnation. That's why it's worthy of such a high penalty, because you're taking his name and you're dragging him through the mud, and you expect that he's going to give you some kind of dignity because you've dragged his authority and his name through the mud. No, you're worth nothing. You're a creature made from dust. You don't deserve that dignity. The only thing that gives you dignity is because he's invested in you, and what's been given can be taken from you. And so these people end up they want to take from God that authority. He turns them over to act like animals. They're literally going to be out there eating the grass, but by everything said and done.
Well, and see, there's the crazy part though too, because it's like when they talk about the Southern homesteaders, rural family, people who are solidly grounded in common sense. That's the vein on how the quote unquote highly educated talk about the South. They talk about like how you guys don't just understand high society and how you guys are akin to, pardon me, animals. And it's just like, no, if they're God-fearing, good Christian people, those are the kind of people I'm going to wind up with. And those are the kind of people who are going to say, God bless this alcohol, pass the ammunition. Those are the kind of people that are the people who are going to fight for something that's intrinsically and obviously extrinsically good. And good's a very subjective term.
Why would I take the opinion of someone who's so confused that they think mutilating their genitalia is going to make them a woman? Why would I take the opinion of someone seriously who believes that the very institutions that they laud around as something that makes them inherently better than everybody else are so evil they need to be dismantled? It's the view of the South that made high institutions of learning and power. Not what they have is this
Bingo.
animalistic. It's the animalistic view of we've given children the ability to affect power.
Yeah.
And it's time to take the power back away from the children because they don't know how to handle it and they need to be put in their place.
Well, where has that mentality come from? Where has that family mentality came from? It's in a sense, the European tradition is uniquely different from others, and the only tradition that I see that carried out with is the South. And you hit on that with the colleges and the institutions that are down there. You guys are so hopped up on college football. I can't even tell you how crazy that is. But it's another level. I think the Michigan State Spartans, Ohio State Buckeyes, University of Michigan Wolverines. You go to their tailgate party. You're blackout drunk before the game starts, right? But with you guys, it's a whole event. It's not even about doing that. It's not even about getting rowdy and drunk and stupid. It's a whole day. It's literally that's a part of your family. That university is a part of your family, and that's your loyalty, your that localist mentality that's there. It's literally in you guys' blood. It's just there, and that revives itself every time I watch a Southern college football game.
Well, I spoke to a guy. He's known a few people from Mississippi, and he says that every single one of them has lamented not being in their homeland, and the way that they talk about going home is going back to their people. I had to go out of state for a few years to work, and I'm telling you, there's an emptiness that you have when you're not around your people. And so, the time spent around the grill while the grill's fired up and the drinks are being made and the preparing of the food, that's part of the event itself. The event is not after the food's cooked and everybody starts eating. The event is, we're getting together for the day and we're going to spend a day and make a day of it. Everybody pitches in. Everybody brings something to the table. We all prepare the food as it is. We work together before we eat together. That's a huge part of it.
Yeah, and the communal aspect of obviously, there is a difference when you talk to Southern Christians versus Northern Christians. And one of the weird parts is I've always, in my mind, I've never separated North and South Christianity. I've always separated East and West. And I wasn't always raised. I was essentially raised Catholic, but like having the Catholic catechism to the Orthodox Christianity, the Greek Orthodox Christianity spectrum, I never looked at it as like a North and South kind of thing. So in my mind, geographically, I know it's kind of strange, but the more I learned about the South, I'm like, yeah, the fact that you brought up, Lukas, you brought up that Lincoln was in correspondence to Karl Marx. Well, Karl Marx had something to do with the destruction of maybe this is on the low end. I'm not really sure. 40 to 60 million of my Orthodox Christian brothers and sisters perishing to several ideologies. I'm not going to get into it here, but to where like you understand that revolutionary spirit can take on a whole different meaning versus the American Revolution, the post-Enlightenment, and versus the rebellious spirit of the South and the dominion and the natural order that they want to restore over that. But now, of course, that's fascist. Oh my gosh, it's so bad, and they want boys to be boys and girls to be girls. How evil! And you get to the point where these things start to contextualize themselves, and then you have to, like, it's so. and you did bring up metaverse, right? It's so, well, it's got a meta aspect to it for sure, but it also has a complacency and reality aspect to it too. And I feel like the heritage that's there, and it's so uniquely American, it doesn't really transfer to people who are quote unquote highly educated or who seem to be smarter than everybody else. It doesn't, you know what I mean? That like the transfer isn't there, and I have a hard time contextualizing this, but because I don't see it on a North and South versus paradigm. I've never seen it that way.
I kind of see this. Go ahead, Trav.
Well, one of the things that I'd like to point out, I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this, but the paradigm of North and South Christianity is fundamentally different. The North early on, it started out as a bunch of congregational Puritans. I would say that, me and Luke, we are from a puritanical tradition, but it's vastly different than the Northern Puritans. But as we've seen, the Northern Christianity started to go leftwards, especially right around the Civil War. That's when the Presbyterians split into Northern and Southern Presbyterians. Dabney argued that they should never have gotten back together, but they did, and they formed the PCUSA. PCUSA is basically all but apostate. I would consider them completely apostate, but there are some PCUSA that's still fairly conservative. Then you have the Northern Baptist and the Southern Baptist. You've probably never, you might have, but I've never heard of a Northern Baptist church ever. And that's because they dove headfirst off into liberalism versus the Southern Baptist church. They stayed faithful for a lot longer. They actually came back from liberalism and they held to the fundamentals. So the southern area is highly regarded as fundamentalist Bible thumpers, right? Well, we are fundamentalists, but a lot of times fundamentalists get a bad rap. And when we say fundamentalist, that means we hold to the virgin birth, the Christ actually died and rose again. these very core tenets. Some even go as far as to say 6-day creation. I'm a little bit more lenient on that area, even though I am a 6-day creationist. The inerrancy of the scriptures, that kind of thing. And that's why I see that huge divide between North and South Christianity, and even West Coast Christianity, because it's just a whole nother ball of wax. And again, this brings it back to what I said at the beginning of the podcast, how we are a culturally Christian nation. Me viewing the South as a nation within a country. And that's one thing that makes us absolutely distinct, is that most, even our more liberal churches, are still far more theologically sound than northern churches. We're not whole cloth ordaining women to be pastors. There are some, but it's nowhere near the level of the of Northern Presbyterians and Northern Episcopalians. We still have that that standard down here, and I think that's a good dividing wall, if you will. It's kind of like the East and West debate for you, except for we're Protestant, so it's North and South divide, and it's a little bit more. I don't want to say crucial, because that's not really the correct word. It's a little bit more distinct. Me looking from the outside at the mass and in the divine liturgical service, I can see a difference, but for me as a low churchman, I'm not seeing a major difference. Whereas I look at you probably see a vast difference between the two, and that's just because that's what you're used to. But me looking at Southern Christianity and Northern Christianity, it's like you looking at the Roman Catholic versus Greek Orthodox, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And coming at it, because I myself, also being Orthodox, not from as much of an Orthodox background as JP, but I guess having come to the same truth from a different direction, when I see the Southern Baptists and I see the difference between them and the Northern Baptists, a lot of that I feel comes from the large injection of the originally Anglican Southern population into that church, sort of as the Episcopalian church started slowly stagnating and dying out, and the low church does speak to the common man, right? It has its own appeal to people who maybe don't have the time to get so engrossed in church history, right? Like, I went to Orthodoxy because, to me, it's simply the logical conclusion of studying church history. But I can understand why people who they're focused on the fundamentals of the faith, they simply want to be just good God-believing people, and they don't really have time for all the details, honestly. I can see where that's a good thing, and I've actually heard Southern Baptists described as working class Anglicans, which is a funny way of saying it because there's a lot of difference, but there's some truth to that, in that because the original Anglican communion has sort of died in a way, the Southern Baptists have kind of carried on the torch of that. And to me, Anglicanism is it's got its own relationship to Orthodoxy, which I've talked about in previous episodes and would actually like to go in depth onto. KB, like you're saying, you want to talk about this more next time. Yeah, I want to as well. I think this is something that definitely merits its own discussion.
I want to double back to something because I wanted to bring this up earlier. We talk about the cultural influences. Travis kind of brought up how he believed the South lost so that the North could be saved, in a sense. I kind of see this as, the Romans defeated Greece militarily, and Greece defeated Rome culturally. And so there was this infusion of Greek and Roman culture, such that today their influence is almost indistinguishable when it comes to, law or philosophy or civics or, a lot of these smaller, more precise elements of culture. Our legal system, for instance, it came from Germanic influences, but it's overwhelmingly Roman. In a way, the Romans were conquered by the Germans, and the Germans were culturally conquered by the Romans. So you see this progression of Greece to Rome to Germans to England to us. We've constantly reinvented, in a way, the same ideas, the same mode of being, but it's being played out in different contexts throughout history. And it's really that core that we're trying to preserve. It's that understanding that we're part of the flow of creation, that God is telling a story through us, and that we as actors should best understand how to play our roles to the best of our abilities. That's one of the analogies that was used by some of the Greek philosophers. And
do I sense some tzatziki sauce getting on the chat now?
What's that?
No. Oh, no tzatziki sauce? Come on, no gyros.
Hey, that's you. You got the bottle, man.
Yeah, man. I'm down here eating gumbo and crawfish, and
hey, it could be Greek for all I know. No,
no,
it's definitely gumbo's not Greek, but
no, it's definitely not Greek.
Gumbo, gyros, close enough.
Hey, close enough.
I like that. No, it's just. I think that in that reinfusion of an understanding of reality through these close to the dirt mentality, I guess, is a good way of putting it. That's been reinjected into the North by and large, and that's what you're seeing. That's what's being played off of.
Man, I see. Oh man, your esoteric pathology is.
Well,
man,
so
I love it.
I'll touch on this. Like I'm trying to understand more about orthodoxy because I'm woefully ignorant about it.
It's okay.
But in our messages, I'm a huge fan of Jonathan Pageau.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of Jordan Peterson. I'm a huge fan of some of the guys in that circle that are in their periphery. I'll look at the guys you recommended, but I'm kind of looking into some of this esoteric stuff myself because I think there's a lot more. I think there's a lot more value in it than the West has placed on it. I think,
and not to like because I don't like want to take that route just like the North likes to crap on the South. I don't want to do that to Protestants and Catholics either because there's still value in what people have to say. I mean, obviously, I'm going to value Christian opinion over others.
right.
But there's also non-Christian opinions that I value over others. Like the Dalai Lama has very wise things and wisdom and things of wisdom to say to people, even though he's not Christian. But he's still an elder. He's still been through some stuff, and he obviously is a ascetic man. So there's definite value into what he says. But I obviously there's a Gnostic part to it too, as you touched on earlier. Now I'm not. This has nothing to do with what we've been talking about. But there's that distinction, right? And there's that distinction that has defined, well, uniquely. It's uniquely American, and it's uniquely separated from our European roots, right? Because I could go on and on about, obviously, what I think and what I know and how I go about doing it, right? But that's something that has come and has passed down from myself, my ancestors, and more importantly, from God. But the way the South has kind of encapsulated that mentality, like I heard you guys on that other podcast, and I was just like, you guys are like really like playing around with a lot of Orthodox theological concepts, but there was a definite American flavor to it, and that distinctly American flavor to it is not. You could say, and like Travis said, there is a difference between Southern and Northern Baptists. I definitely agree there. I see it, and I've met Northern Baptists, and I can't stand Northern Protestants. Northern Protestants are different. Northern Catholics are usually more liberal than probably Southern Catholics, but I don't know. But we have our own flavor here of Catholicism too. We have Chaldeans. Chaldeans are a whole different flavor of Catholics. They're closer to Orthodox Christians. So the thing is like you have all these different flavors in America, and I'm not going to get on like all multiculturalism or that stuff, but there is a unifier there, and that unifier is obviously the Son of Man. And he's obviously going to be that distinct. It's just it's undeniable. The nature there is undeniable, and to try to trivialize that, and try to like trivialize somebody who's been working on a farm their whole life in the South, or raising cattle or across the board, homesteading, across the board. To me, up here in the North, working from home and doing the things that I got to do for my family and stuff, to trivialize our walks of life, to me, that just doesn't show like you don't have a distinct appreciation for one another. Like, to me, that's not fundamentally Christian. That's not fundamentally. That doesn't show like you have a unitive appreciation for somebody else, no matter what. You know what I mean?
So one thing, I know we talked about this before we started recording, but I'm gonna re-say it again because more people are in the chat and we're recording. Blah 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 blah. Anyways, and it's that I've become a lot more ecumenical over the past couple years, and by what I mean by ecumenical is I give a lot more grace to people that are not the same flavor of Christian as me. So obviously we read and listen to a lot of Presbyterians. We are Baptist. I like a lot of Anglicans. I like a lot of Orthobros. I think that, in all honesty, a lot of my ignorance of Orthodoxy comes from the fact that I am born in a Western society. I am a Western Christian. And so I see our church emerging out of the Church of Rome, and during the Reformation, during the purifying process of what had to happen in Rome. The Orthodox never had to experience a Reformation because kind of just stayed in one path ever since the 11th century. Yeah. But I see like a lot of, I would say that there's more, to use a Baptist term, more saved Orthobros sitting in or standing, I don't know if y'all sit or stand in liturgy, but in y'all's liturgy, then there would be lay people in the Catholic Church. Now, I still believe that there are people that are Christians within the Catholic Church. Standing. Anyways,
we Baptist every Sunday is leg day.
yeah, we stand up, we sit down, we stand up, we sit down. Anyways, but I so I have a lot more grace towards the Orthodox side from my point of view, and I think we're far more similar than we are different. There's still some stuff that, no offense to any of y'all, is weird for me, just because I was not raised in that tradition. The whole chanting and stuff, I think it's absolutely beautiful, but that's not for me. Give me a good hymn or a good psalm to sing with my brothers, and we're good to go. Give me a good hour-long sermon, exegeting the Word of God. But
you seem like you got a real operatic voice. Just listen to your tone. You seem like you got some good.
Well, Daddy sang bass.
There we go. Oh, boom, 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 boom. I like it.
But I mean, okay, so I think we're one of the, not the major, but one of the major differences is our form of liturgy. So a lot of Baptists, that are not historic Baptists, would say that they don't have a liturgy. Well, everyone has a liturgy. Even Pentecostals have a liturgy. Our liturgies are just different. Yes, bless their hearts.
Liturgy, mass, it's kind of like it's kind of the same thing. The Catholics like to call it a mass, even though it is distinctly papist. It's still I'll give them credit where credit's due. It's still liturgy.
Yes, I mean, liturgy just means how you perform a service, right? It's just the order of which you perform a service. So within my liturgy, we sing hymns. Well, actually, we open up with an invocation, pray. We sing hymns. We do a pastoral prayer. We do a psalm recitation. We read one scripture from the Bible. Then we sing another hymn, and then the preaching starts, and then we shake everybody's hands. That kind of thing. So that's our liturgy, and that's vastly different than y'all's. Okay, but we still have a lot of the core tenets within there. So there's still prayer, there's still singing, there's still scripture reading, there's still preaching. All of the things that the scripture lays out that we should do within a church service. So, but all that to say is I've become far more ecumenical because I believe that the third person of the Trinity is not a failure. A lot of Western Christians would like to portray the third person of the Trinity as a failure, whether or not they would admit to it or not.
No, that's a distinction. No. I know what he means. Is he's conquered death by death.
Well, no, it's more than that. The third person of the Trinity literally leads the church throughout all of time, right? So the Holy Spirit comes and seals us until the day of our resurrection, right? He literally purifies not only the church but also the individual. So the Holy Spirit resides in us, and then we therefore we be conformed more into the image of Christ. And that also goes for not only the individual but also the church. So I see that the Holy Spirit is constantly refining the church to be more and more like Christ. So, and to say that this particular sect has zero Christians, and I'm not talking about sects as in, I'm not including, Seventh-day Adventists, I'm not including Jehovah's Witnesses, I'm not including Oneness Pentecostals. Dang sure ain't including the Mormons in this. Okay, I'm talking about Orthodox Christians, small O Orthodox, because I would consider me an Orthodox, small O Orthodox Christian. I hold to the creeds and I hold to my confession. All that to say is I believe that God has a remnant within each sect of these church. I believe there's less in the Church of Rome just simply because they denied the gospel. Okay. But I would have to say that within Lutherans, within Presbyterians, within the Orthodox, within the Methodists, see that there's a remnant that God has called and chosen to himself, and the Holy Spirit has sealed them until the day of the resurrection, when until the day of judgment, rather, not the kind of the same, but a little
see
different.
some more. This is the nuts part, but I see some more overlap here because this is how the North, in a sense, has treated the South. There's that replacement theology, and I don't want to like rip on Catholics and Protestants with this one, but there's that replacement theology that has always would evolved be a bad term to use. Developed, maybe. There's that replacement theology that's passed down and kind of has transpired. Yeah, that's a better word. Transpired throughout the ages and has gone away from the original distinction, just like the idea of America, right? The revolution.
Can I ask you to clarify that real quick? I don't mean to interrupt, but what do you mean by replacement theology? Because in Reformed circles, that means probably something completely different.
Reformed, yes, Reformed. Okay. I mean, so that's what replace. I know, okay, but there are certain sects where you said you have that problem where they have obviously replaced and gutted it. Obviously, well, here's looking at you, Rome, but where they've taken stuff and have completely gutted it and replaced it with the reasoning of man. More of a humanistic approach.
You're talking about like scholasticism,
right? But scholasticism. See, that's the crazy kind of the schizophrenic part about scholasticism because it's so across the board and so abundant across the West that it just doesn't necessarily tie itself to the Catholic Church. You know, I mean, it's you can even find there is a sense of scholasticism within the Orthodox Church, but it's just a different brand of it. You know, it's just a different aspect of it. Like there's that scholarly rigor to the faith, and and it's not taking away from people who have tried to interpret the word of God. But that's just it with something like you have a living, breathing word of God. You have the living, breathing word of the Constitution, right? So there's that intermingling of how these concepts work and how they're supposed to work in unison and in communion, right?
So this might be a little simplistic, but let me throw this out there because I'm kind of with Travis on the whole, these are different sects of Christianity. I would go as far as to say that we're probably different organs of the body of Christ, as kind of a more theological approach to that. I kind of see the East as having the more experiential theology, and I see the West as having more theology categorized by term logic. To be super simplistic about it, I kind of see it as like a right brain, left brain kind of thing, where I think the synthesis of the two, and I don't mean even theologically, but I think the two understanding one another and working together would be beneficial for both sides. Let me put it that way.
Well, that's just. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, so kind of what I think JP's been picking up on is I'm just now getting into some real, like those last year and a half, I've been getting into some of the deep esoteric lore. And this gets into my curiosity with Eastern Orthodoxy, because Eastern Orthodoxy has been talking about this for a while, right? And so I'm realizing that in order to really understand the nature of things, you have to understand them from the esoteric. You can't just understand them via term logic. It doesn't work that way. And that's something that, as far as I've been reading, the East has been saying for a very long time, that you can't just formalize everything. It doesn't work that way. You can't just grasp it with your mind, because God is infinite and he's created things that don't make sense to your mind. So in a way, you have to experience them instead of understanding them. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's kind of the
Another way that I would
direction I'm going.
Anyway, with regard to that, there was actually I forget the exact term for it, like the essence nature distinction, or something like that. JP might know the term, but anyway, it's basically that they're like I keep forgetting the term, but like God's essence energy distinction. Yes. The energy of God, his actions through the Holy Spirit can be seen on earth, and that we can understand God through that. But the actual essence of God himself, the transcendent deity that is above reality, we cannot understand because our senses are limited by reality. And that, I think, is a very orthodox concept that much
Our
of the
material,
West doesn't
our
really
material
emphasize.
being is limited, and our material formulation of the world is limited. Now, this gets into, I obviously I'm going to tie this over, but this is the problem that I have with these liberals who think they know better than y'all, where their material knowledge and their material gain of the world and what they think they know better, thanks Karl Marx, to equivocate or equalize you guys, I say you guys, to equivocate people like us into y'all
Sorry.
y'all into a category, into a box, and label it with that archetypical, nonsensical, you could go the route of, oh well, you're just a fundamentalist religious nut job who doesn't know better, or you could go the route of you're some just backwards redneck or hick that just doesn't know any better, right? But yet, you guys are pretty self-sufficient, yeah. And from what I've known, and the part that is absolutely just like, is dichotomous a word? Is dichotomous a word?
Yes.
It's I was going to say hippopotamus. Okay,
if you can say it, it's a word.
Esoteric. That's so esoteric. Okay, so
I'm here for all the words, just to let you know.
It's a platonic form, JP. Just think of it that way.
I gotta get my genitives first.
Chair? What is the form of a chair?
Stop it! I don't want to. This for next episode. Okay. So dichotomous is there. Like it's that whole dichotomy of like, oh, y'all just stupid. No. If you're gonna call somebody a stupid or an idiot, respect due is respect given. If somebody's gonna be a stupid moron to you for no reason, that could it be deserved? Possibly. But could it be given? Well, definitely. I mean, there's givers and takers too. And I don't want to like get off on like the whole archetypical American aspect of Southern heritage, but there is that stereotype of the North and the South, and they think that they're so high up on their horse. You all got colleges, you all got institutions. It's not like we're any high on the hog more because we got Ivy League schools up here, and I'm not even saying here we got in the Midwest. What has Northwestern? Ooh, big whoop! It's a freaking University of Chicago is a pretty big one too, but that's more of a shit lib school. But anyway, the thing of it is what I'm getting at is like they think because of the original 13 colonies and that having that puritanical northern distinction versus the southern distinction is there. It's always that attitude is still so prevalent, and just that obviously those archetypes are there for a reason, and that's I see that pathology just feed into it, and KB brought it up too. It's so interesting on how he frames liberalism and how he says Travis said liberalism, because it's so distinctly different from what I know what classical liberalism is supposed to be versus what it's turned into now. God help us. And it's obviously I'm thinking a little bit more idealistically on that, and I've gone totally ADD right now. And to trivialize like your culture versus the Norse culture, it's so, well, it's duplicitous, but it's also it doesn't serve anybody, in the long run. It doesn't do anybody any good either. So I was going nowhere with that fast, obviously, and one of you guys kind of, I guess, try to piece it.
Let me. I want to bring this in. So the opening, quote unquote, opening salvo of the Civil War was the firing on Fort Sumter. Now, the thing that's always talked about is, well, the South shot first, and they opened up on the fort, and that was it. That was it. That's the start of war. Here's what needs to be understood. When the South opened up onto that fort, number one, there were no casualties, first off. It was intentional. It was a show of force. Number two, there were several times when the two commanders on either side were in regular communication. There were times when the Southern commander would send out a message saying, "Hey man, you guys good? Y'all gonna give up yet? Is this it? Are you good? You need anything?" And the Northern commander's like, "You know what? I really want to, but I really can't give up because that would be bad luck." So and really what ended that conflict is the North ran out of ammunition. They can't fire anymore. So what are you going to do? He had to give it, the good old college try, as they say. That was the opening for the Civil War. The South would have been content to be left alone. They didn't want a prolonged conflict, and not because they would have lost. They didn't want a prolonged conflict because prolonged conflict doesn't help anyone. No one's benefited by it. And what I think you're going to see now in the current United States is I think we're going to balkanize. And I think we're going to balkanize because the Southern idea of, they are that people and we are our own people, and we don't have to govern one another. It's not a requirement. There's no embedded law of nature that requires us to have the same rulers. So let's just not. I think that's going to be the end of it. I'm praying for that end. Perhaps there's a lot of people that see that as too hopeful. I think that's what's going to happen, and I think that's what's going to happen precisely because everybody. Number one, you're seeing all the conversation about secession now. You're seeing both sides talk about it. Most of the people out there don't want to fight. They just want to live their lives without being in constant warfare all the time. And the South's way of handling that was, frankly, segregation. It's a voluntary thing. You stay on that side, I'll stay on this side, and we don't have to fight one another because we don't have to rule one another. It's not a battle over power. We're different kinds of people who do things differently, Let's stay on our side of the fence.
The stupidly ironic thing about identity politics is that, like you said earlier, they're constantly redefining terms, but the idiots are like, oh, well, let's not be racist. But, but they're going to segregating. It's so dumb.
Yeah, exactly.
So dumb.
Well, it's funny because they were the ones policing the words, right? You can't call people certain things, and they're back to calling black people colored people. It's like y'all were so mad. Y'all. I'm sorry, I gotta go here. Y'all were all ass mad because we called people colored people, and now you guys are back to doing the same thing. And you got the token black person up there saying, "Well, you have to call me a person of color." It's like, bro. Just stop. Calm down.
I'm dyslexic. I always thought it was colored people.
And the funny thing is, 99% of black people don't use that term, right? It's literally this college-trained, white-presenting, just literally a white liberal in black skin. They're the only people who use that term. Actual black people, like, yeah, man, we're black people. Like, there's no, like,
Well, I mean, the black people call those people Oreos, and they call them Oreos for a reason, right? Because they're black in skin only. That's just the reality of it. And really, I want to say this because it comes across as I'm just throwing rocks at people, and I'm really not. I genuinely think that a lot of these people are well-meaning. They're just so stupidly wrong that they need to shut up and listen instead of harping on like some hysterical woman. It's like, bro, just shut up and listen, because there's people who know more than you. I don't care what college you came from. I care about whether or not you know what you're talking about. And when they're so disconnected from the people on the ground that they think the black person down there on Main Street wants to be called a person of color when he wants to be called a black man, when they're that disconnected from the reality of the situation, he just needs to shut up and go sit down.
Or better yet, he's an American. I mean,
beyond even the racial aspect, but that's the this is a whole.
It's just a hot example, right?
Talking about civic versus ethnic, whatever. But I just kind of wanted to interject and say that we've been going for over 2 hours now, so just I know we got tons of things that we want to discuss, but we have a whole nother episode for that, so we're probably going to want to try to wrap it up. We've already touched on things that probably are best for the next episode anyway, but so just that's really all I have. If anybody else wants to finish their points, then they can go ahead, and that way we can wrap it up.
Well, you guys don't want me to finish my points because I could go on for another hour, but will you, for the love of God, it's not polis, poli. Just ragging on you guys.
I'm from the South.
We're Southern. We can barely pronounce
it. You're not Southern enough. You guys don't have euros.
All right.
Euros?
I don't know when to start taking
I use Confederate dollars.
I think he's talking about Southern European. Like he's doing the med pill.
Literally Southern European.
Man, I ain't no Euro fag.
I am a Native American. My people have been in this country since the 1600s.
Wait a minute. Whoa. Whoa. 1600s.
If Elizabeth Warren could claim 1068th engine in her, that I can claim to like 100 something engine in me. I'm a real Native American here, guys.
When we got here in the 1600s, there were Indian tribes that had not yet migrated into the continental U.S. yet. The Apaches were still in Mexico. So I can legitimately say there are native tribes that weren't here as long as my people.
Yep.
We're the real Native Americans.
Love it.
Well, anyways, this was fun. I enjoyed it, and I can't wait to do it again. And we're gonna have to have y'all on the Dixie Polis.
Yeah, this was a great time, fellas. I appreciate it.
Very much so. Very much appreciated. And one more time for the plug. Maybe I'll play a siren sound as you make the plug. I'm not gonna play.